Okay, so this is being recorded so that we can upload it to our website after the fact. But as I said, my name is Caitlin Flam. I am the Marketing and Admissions Coordinator. My colleague Claire Alpus, who is our graduate advisor, couldn't join me today, but you can make one-on-one advising appointments with her or with our graduate assistant, Rachel Durham, who is a current concentration year MSW student, by calling our welcome desk. And I will have that phone number on the very last slide of this presentation so that you can jot that down if you're interested in scheduling a one-on-one advising appointment. I'm also joined tonight at our lunch break chat by one of our wonderful faculty members. Dr. Kristen Atkinson is here and will be able to answer questions during the Q&A portion as well. So just giving a brief overview of our MSW program here at MSU Denver. We are fully accredited by the Council on Social Work Education, who serve as the sole accrediting body for social work programs here in the US. The reason that accreditation is important to you as a student is for two reasons. The first is that it means your degree will be recognized across the United States for licensure purposes as coming from an accredited program. And the second is because CSWE holds all social work programs to certain standards to make sure students are learning what they need to learn to be successful in the field of social work. Our MSW program has been around since 2011, so we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary next year, and we have been fully accredited by CSWE that entire time. The MSW program at MSU Denver has what's known as an advanced generalist curriculum that is rooted in the ideas of integrative practice. What this means is that all of our students are going to learn micro, meso, and macro concepts. We do not have concentrations or tracks in our program. We used to on our old curriculum, but found that it was a little too binding for students. We had a micro concentration and a macro concentration, and there wasn't really a way for students to cross streams between those two areas, which caused some frustration along the way. So we no longer have concentrations or tracks, but students can focus their practice in our program through an optional pathway, which serves as an advising recommendation of what electives to take to focus in on your areas of interest. You can also focus your practice through your field placement locations, as well as your capstone project and projects done in other courses. The coursework in the MSW program is highly sequenced, meaning our fall courses are only offered in the fall, spring courses only offered in the spring. You have to take the fall semester courses in order to take the spring semester courses, etc. And that is why Claire is our academic advisor for all our MSW program students to help make sure they are sequencing through the program correctly. And if something happens, you have to take a semester off, you get off track, she's there to help you create a revised plan to still make it to that graduation benchmark. So just some examples of some of the coursework you'll find in our curriculum. There is a full advising snapshot that shows that full sequencing on our website. I'll have a link to our website on that last slide, as well as the phone number for our welcome desk. In the foundation year, which all regular program students take, you're taking that foundational coursework. So courses like privilege, oppression, and power, social policy analysis, groups, teams, and leaderships. In the concentration year, your practice gets a little bit more focused and advanced. So taking courses like advanced policy and advocacy, advanced integrative practice leadership, and advanced integrative practice clinical. And then in the concentration year, students also take 3 electives, and that's where those pathways come into play. And some of our electives include things like school-based social work, therapeutic use of groups, exploring diversity, crisis intervention, organizational development. I think we're up to just under 20 electives at this point. And so we have a lot of options to allow you to focus your practice through those electives. So we do have 2 programs, as I alluded to. We have our regular program that is designed for students with an undergraduate degree in a field other than social work. The regular program is fall start only and is 60 credit hours, so 30 credits of foundation coursework, 30 credits of concentration coursework. And then we have our advanced standing program, which is designed for students with an undergraduate degree in social work from a CSWE accredited program. That program is summer start only, and it is only 36 credit hours, 6 credits of summer bridge, and then just that 30 credits of concentration coursework, since advanced standing program students already got most of the foundational coursework during their undergraduate degrees. We also have multiple enrollment and course delivery options for both the regular program and the advanced standing program. In terms of enrollment options, we have a full-time and a part-time option. Full-time, you're taking 15 credits or 5 classes each semester. And from what we've heard from previous students, it's about a 50-hour per week commitment between classes, homework, field placement hours, the whole kit and caboodle. The advanced standing program takes 1 year to complete full-time, summer, fall, spring, and the regular program takes 2 years to complete full-time, fall, spring, fall, spring. The part-time enrollment option, you take 6 to 9 credits a semester, so 2 to 3 classes, and it's more like a 30-hour a week commitment. In years 1 and 3 of the regular part-time plan, you're taking 3 classes a semester and you don't have a field placement, and then in years 2 and 4 of the regular program part-time plan, you're only taking 2 classes and you do have a field placement. Advanced standing part-time is a 2-year program. Again, in year 1, taking just 9 credits a semester, no field placement, and then in that final year of the program, taking 2 classes a semester and adding that field placement. So it still comes out to about 30 hours a week, whether you're in a 9 credit semester or a 6 credit semester, because of that difference in if you have your field placement or not. One thing I want to flag is that although we refer to these as full-time and part-time because of our sequencing, in terms of federal financial aid at the graduate level, they consider full-time graduate enrollment to be 6 or more credits. So even our part-time students are eligible for full-time financial aid in terms of what sort of loans and other funding they might be able to receive. Part-time enrollment at the graduate level for federal funding is considered to be 3 credits or less. So just to let you know that even if you're a part-time student in our program, you're still eligible for full-time financial aid. And then we have our 2 course delivery options. We have our fully online option where you are guaranteed a spot in online, primarily asynchronous sections of all required courses. They may occasionally have synchronous requirements, but for the most part, they are asynchronous. I used to really have to explain the difference between synchronous and asynchronous in information sessions in the past, but with 2020, I feel like we all of a sudden all have a greater understanding of what the difference between synchronous and asynchronous learning is. But just in case you haven't had to deal with that hurdle, asynchronous means that you don't have to be online at a specific day and time, versus synchronous is like this, where we're all in a room together at the same time in an online setting. Our online courses are not self-paced, so you do still do that work within that week's module within that week. You just get to decide when in that week you're doing your work. So you might have deadlines, like your first discussion post has to be up by Tuesday night, and you have to have replied to X number of classmates by Saturday night, and your assignments are due Saturday. But within the week, you don't have a set time that you have to sit down at your computer to do those assignments and participate in class. Our other course delivery option is our mixed traditional option. Students sometimes call this our hybrid option because you can take classes on the Auraria campus when we're allowed to have classes on campus, online and or in the hybrid format. We guarantee you a seat in a section of all required courses, but you may not always get into your preferred choice of section, just depending on what's available when you go to register. I've had a lot of questions from prospective students about how we handled our mixed traditional course delivery option in fall 2020 with the pandemic. We did move all of our courses online for fall 2020, but what we did is that courses that were originally supposed to be on campus or hybrid have synchronous components to try to retain some of that feel that you would get from being in the physical classroom. We did just announce to our students this past week that we are going to be remaining fully online in spring 2020. As the president of our institution likes to say, the virus has a vote, and right now its vote is saying it's not safe for us to resume a high number of classes on campus, but we are, fingers crossed, very hopeful that by summer and next fall, we'll start to be able to be present on campus again. But we're really just taking it one term at a time right now so that we can see what the government is saying, what the state and local governments are saying, and what campus leadership is saying. So just talking briefly about what makes our MSW program different. I have our 2019-2020 student profile here. I'm still working on pulling together our 2020-2021 student profile, but it looks pretty similar in the preliminary analyses I've done. So our students are pretty evenly mixed between under the age of 30 and over the age of 30. We do serve a predominantly post-traditional population at MSU Denver, so students over the age of 25, students who might be military, active duty or veterans, students who are caregivers either to children or other family members. All of that falls in that post-traditional category, and that's a large percentage of the students we serve. Our program is predominantly female, as is common in helping professions. So about 88% of our students last year identified as female, and only about 12% identified as male. And then in terms of race and ethnicity, last year, around 67% of our students did identify as white, with 30% identifying as BIPOC, and 3% choosing not to disclose that information. Like I said, the numbers are looking to be pretty similar this year. And in terms of graduate programs, they do tend to be a higher percentage of white students than you see at perhaps the undergraduate level. MSU Denver as a whole is a federally designated Hispanic serving institution and does serve a large population of BIPOC students. And we're working to make sure that that is reflected in our MSW program as well, by making sure that we aren't unintentionally creating barriers to entry for students from a variety of socioeconomic, racial, ethnic, etc. backgrounds. Our average classroom size in the MSW program is around 15 students. Classes do tend to skew a little larger in the foundation year, a little smaller in concentration year, with our field and capstone courses tending to be the smallest, capped at around 10 to 12 students per course, just to make sure you get that individualized attention. But even in the foundation year, we don't let classes go above, I would say, 20 to 22 students, and we try to keep them around that mark because that small classroom size is really important to us in helping you make sure that you get the ideal learning environment. So just touching on a little bit of admissions planning before we open up the Q&A. The 2021 MSW admissions cycle did open back on September 8th, 2020. We do only have one admissions cycle annually because our programs are summer start only and fall start only. So the admissions cycle typically runs from early September through mid-January. This year, our priority consideration deadline is October 29th, 2020 at 11:59 p.m. Mountain Time. And the final application deadline is January 14th, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. Mountain Time. It does take us about 10 to 12 weeks after those deadlines to complete the admissions review process, and we notify applicants via email of their admissions decision. I just want to emphasize again, 10 to 12 weeks from the deadline, not from when you finish submitting all your materials. In terms of the difference between the priority consideration deadline and the final deadline, everyone who has a complete application at that priority deadline will have their materials reviewed this fall in November and December by our faculty review committee. And we use a very holistic admissions review process in the MSW program. So what that means is we are not disqualifying applicants based on one element of their application alone. Instead, we evaluate the application as a whole using a series of rubrics, and then we're able to rank all of our applicants. And the faculty, after that final deadline, are able to say, you know, based on what we saw this year, anyone with a score of X or higher is considered qualified for the MSW program and should be admitted. What we do at the priority deadline, since we don't know where that cutoff will be yet, is folks who are in the very top of that priority pool, whose scores are so high that no matter where that cutoff ends up being, they're going to be above it. We send them their admissions decision in late December to early to mid-January. And that gives them a head start on preparing to start the program, searching for their field placements, and registering for classes when that opens. But it doesn't improve your chances of getting into apply by priority, nor does it hurt your chances to wait until the final deadline to get in. We use the same review process at both deadlines, and at the priority deadline, if you aren't in the very top of the pool, we just send you a notification that we're rolling you forward to view your application against the full pool after the final deadline. So if you've already started work on your application, you already have a couple recommendations in or have a really good essay draft going, I encourage you to try applying by the priority deadline if that feels comfortable to you. But if you feel like you'll have a stronger application if you wait and just make sure that everything's done before January 14th, that is a perfectly fine choice to make as well. In terms of acceptance to our program, these two graphs show the number of applications we've had over the past 5 years on that blue line and the number of students we've accepted each year on that orange line. So you can see that as our number of applications increased, our number of accepted students increased as well. Like I said, because we use a holistic review process, we aren't saying, you know, we have 50 spots of advanced standing seats to fill, and once we hit 50, we're stopping. We try to admit as many qualified students as we can every year. Occasionally, we do run into some capacity issues and have to utilize a wait list, where we just aren't sure if we have the faculty power to teach enough students. But we do our best to then get students off the wait list as we have students defer or decline their spot in the program. So the regular program has an average acceptance rate of about 77%, and the advanced standing program has an average acceptance rate of about 71%. Advanced standing is more competitive than the regular program just because students are essentially applying to the second year of graduate school since they just do concentration year coursework, so the faculty do hold them to higher standards. One of our admissions eligibility requirements is an undergrad GPA of 3.0 or higher. But as I said, because we use a holistic review process, we don't disqualify folks based on one element of their application alone. So while we look for a GPA of 3.0 or higher, we do accept students that have a lower GPA. You can see that over the past 5 application cycles on average, only just over 82% of the students we accepted to the regular program and just over 92% of the students accepted to advanced standing had a GPA of 3.0 or higher. And the remaining applicants that we accepted had GPAs that were 2.99 or lower. When we accept a student that has a lower undergraduate GPA, it's with a stipulation that they maintain a 3.0 GPA in their first semester of the MSW program or higher. And the vast majority of students we accept with that stipulation succeed and do that with flying colors. So we know that GPA is not always reflective of potential, which is why we don't disqualify you if you have a lower GPA. For folks that have a lower GPA, my recommendation is always to make sure the rest of their application, recommendations, professional history, written materials are as strong as possible to just make up during that holistic review process for the drag from your GPA, to just really show your strengths. So I always like to close before we go to the Q&A with just some tips and tricks for applying. I have been with the Department of Social Work since fall 2016 and overseeing the MSW admissions process in that time. And over time, I've picked up on a few things that seem to help smooth the way for students when they're applying. So my biggest piece of advice is to give your application the time it deserves. I know when I was in undergrad and I just finished a grad program a couple months ago, I was definitely the type of student that sometimes waited until the night before a paper was due to write it because that pressure helped me, and I had other things I wanted to do in the meantime. But with your admissions essay, I do highly recommend writing it and giving yourself enough time to step away and come back and read it with a fresh set of eyes. That admissions essay is the primary way that the faculty are evaluating you. They are also looking at your letters of recommendation. We're also looking at your professional history, but that essay is how the faculty get to know you, get to know your writing skills, get to know your passion for the profession of social work. So you want to make sure you're giving it the time it deserves and not rushing it the night before it's due. And then that ties into the second point of revising your written materials. Take the time to read it out loud to yourself, to a friend, to a family member, have someone else read it, because sometimes a new set of eyes can catch where you accidentally put the word "the" twice in a row and you just skim over it every time. And you can also use a writing center. If you're on our prospective student list, you were emailed this week about how the MSU Denver Writing Center does work with MSW program applicants, whether or not you're a current or former MSU Denver student. So they can definitely serve as that second set of eyes to just check over and help you proofread or help you brainstorm if you just get stuck. I also recommend giving your recommenders at least 3 weeks prior to the deadline to submit their recommendation. On the application, you can go in and enter your recommenders at any point in time, and they immediately get notified of that recommendation request. And that just gives them enough time to fit the recommendation into their schedule so that they can write a really strong recommendation for you. And also make sure to let your recommenders know the deadline and which one you're applying for. I hear from some of our undergraduate faculty every year reaching out a few days before the priority deadline saying, I just got a recommendation request for a student. Do you know if they're trying to apply by priority or not? So making sure your recommenders know when it's due by, and if you're applying by priority, letting them know it's due by October 29th, not January 14th. I also sometimes recommend maybe nudging that date up by a few days, say it's due October 25th or January 10th. Just to give yourself some wiggle room in case your recommenders have unexpected things crop up. It gives you a little bit of peace of mind to know that everything is in a few days early. So now we're going to start the chat. There are 2 ways that you can interact during this chat portion. You can either ask questions via the text-based chat, and I will answer them. To pull that up, just hover over the toolbar at the bottom. Chat should be there. Or let me see if it'll tell me what the keyboard shortcut is. Alt-H, if you're on a computer, also pulls up the chat. In Zoom, you can also raise your hand, and I will unmute you, and you can ask the question that way if you'd prefer. Real quick, these are those resources that I wanted to let y'all know about. So if you'd like to schedule an advising appointment, you can call 303-615-0555. You can also email me. I'm at socialwork@msudenver.edu with any questions about the program or admissions process. Our MSW application website, including a link to our step-by-step walkthrough, is there, and then our MSW program website is there as well. I will also copy this information and put it into the chat so that you can see it. But I'm going to stop my screen share for now, just because it makes it a little less awkward for me to be reading the chat and seeing y'all raise your hands and stuff. So with that being said, feel free to drop questions in the chat. Like I said, I have both myself and Dr. Kristen Atkinson here to answer questions about the program, the admissions process, the curriculum, the field of social work. And then I will get those resources into the chat as well. So let me just copy those real quick. And yeah, I think I saw Jess raise her hand. So yeah, let me unmute you. Oh, there you go. What's up, Jess?
I do have a couple questions. So the first one was, is there a cost difference between the fully online and the hybrid?
That is a really great question. So there is not a tuition difference between taking classes on campus or online or in the hybrid format. There is currently a fee difference. So in normal non-COVID terms, online pays slightly less in fees because they waive the fees for campus resources that you don't have access to as a fully online student. In fall 2020, they adjusted the fee structure to make it the same for all students regardless of course delivery format, just because I think only 10% of our courses are being offered on campus and we aren't able to open things like the rec center. So they did adjust that fee structure, but in normal times, online is slightly cheaper because of the adjusted fee structure, but it comes to like $100, $200 per semester. So it's not a huge difference.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then my next question is, you had a slide regarding demographics, and I was wondering how many non-binary students you've had enrolled. And do you consider your program to be working towards more inclusive gender language, or is this going to be something that might not work for me? So
Yeah, so one of the really hard things in terms of getting the demographic information on non-binary students is that due to state and federal reporting regulations, we are required on the admissions application to ask male or female.
yeah, but
And
it's worded as biological sex, and your
yes,
slide said gender. So
yeah,
there is that.
yep,
Okay.
yeah. So there is the difference. It's that is the only gender or sex information that we have is from the admissions application at this point in time. We've been talking with the Office of Admissions about the problematic nature of in our reports when we pull, it calls it gender, even though it's biological sex on the application, that there is no non-binary option. So we've been talking with and advocating with them to change that, but it's taking time because the systems that they have to do for federal requirements aren't set up that way. So it's something that we're working towards in terms of that reporting. In terms of in the program as a whole, I'll let Kristen talk about that a little bit since she is in the classroom. But I know we are supportive of non-binary identities in terms of on my side in the Office of Student Services on the enrollment confirmation form, we ask what your preferred name is and what your pronouns are so that we can make sure that we're addressing and identifying students correctly. Privilege, oppression, and power is a big part of the curriculum, but yeah, I'll let Kristen talk about how we're working towards that in the department as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, thanks so much for asking that question because I noticed it on the slide too, and this is my first time doing one of the MSW perspective talks. And it's definitely a conversation that we're having in our department, and that is, I think, an active conversation on campus at large. I would say that there are different levels of understanding and comfort with gender identity and what that looks like and sort of what is appropriate practice. We are doing trainings. Last year, I co-facilitated with another of our faculty a campus-wide faculty learning community that was really focused on gender identity and specifically around transgender and gender non-binary and gender non-conforming identities. And then there's been, I know so far this year, some training as well happening. So it's a conversation, it's a work in progress. We're not doing it perfectly, if I can be honest with you. We're not doing it.
You're trying, there's effort.
Yeah.
It's not just being ignored. So.
Absolutely. It's a conversation. We're doing a lot of self-work and self-education. And I think students are also engaging in that process and like really open to it and open to having those conversations and to, thinking about language and how we show up and how we name ourselves and how we refer to other people. So yeah, thanks for asking that. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And any other questions, Jess?
As far as the field experiences go, is there someone that I can talk to? So I'm new to the area, kind of. I've been here now for 7 months, but there's been a pandemic, so does it count? I don't know. But is there someone I can talk to about possible internships that are out there? Just because I'm not familiar with the area.
Yeah, that is a really great question. And I would have to connect with our Office of Field Education to see what type of outreach they're able to do with prospective students. We do have a dedicated Office of Field Education, and every student works one-on-one with an assigned field placement navigator to help them through that placement process. They maintain relationships with over 700 agencies throughout the state, not just in the Denver metro area. So they are a really great resource. I have a handout that has like 15 to 20 potential agencies just to give kind of an idea of the range of agencies that we work with. I know that it is hard for them to share that full database just because it's within our SONIA database system and they can't give access to that until students are enrolled and things like that. But if you have specific questions, you can always feel free to email me at social work and I can connect with a member of the field team to get those answers. I just don't know what their preferred communication is because they are having to provide support to all of our undergrad and graduate students. So I don't know what their capacity is for interfacing with prospective students. So I am happy to serve as that bridge with the field team.
I know what I want to do, so it's not like I need the whole database.
Oh, perfect.
But I don't know if there's someone that already knows where I can find what I want to do. So,
exactly.
Sorry,
yeah, and that's.
Sorry, I'm getting dark.
Yeah, and that's what the field placement navigators are great at. If you come in saying, I know I want to work with this population or at this agency or this type of agency, they can say, great, let's search the database for that. But they also are super supportive if you come in and say, I have no idea what I want to do in my field placement. They can also help you figure that out and navigate that. And the really great thing in the regular program is that you get to do 2 placements, one foundation and one concentration. So you really get to build your network in your time in the program and your exposure to different areas of social work practice.
I'm excited. From what I've read, this is going to be a great program. Hopefully I make it. And
yeah.
So thank you so much.
Of course. I see I have a question from Valley in the chat about trends for employment and salary post-graduation. And that is a really great question. So Valley, do you want me to unmute you so you can ask a little bit more about that? Yeah, go right ahead.
Thank you. Well, that's one of my questions. And I guess even in that question, I asked multiple questions. It was a bit of a double-barreled. But I think I've been to a few program lunch chats like this, and there are times when it's like a smaller group like this, and I'm like, I can talk, and then there are times when it's like a bunch of people, and I don't want to have everybody's airtime. But yeah, just if you could add some clarity around what you're seeing for trends once folks graduate from the program and what their employment and salary looks like, as well as. And then I actually have some follow-ups. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm trying to pull up my career information right now just so I get the statistics correct. There we go. So there is definitely a need for trained mental health and behavioral health professionals. So our students do have a fairly good job placement rate. It is. Adobe is not wanting to play nice with me. I want to say that by 2 months post-graduation, I think it's like 85%. Here we go. It's working now. By 2 months post-graduation, oh my gosh, where is it? Sorry, I'm having to scroll through all my stuff. Here we are. 2 months or less of graduation, about 77% of our students had a job in the field of social work for MSW grads. By 3 to 6 months post-graduation, that number had increased to 93%. And then within a year of graduation, 98% of our students were employed in the field of social work. And of those, about 30% of our grads are usually hired by a field placement agency, which is really great to hear. I've heard from agencies that we work with in the past, they really like hiring our grads because they feel like as soon as they cross that stage, they are ready. They don't have to do as much post-graduation training with them as they might from students from other programs across the US. In terms of salary, the average salary for a social worker in the state of Colorado is about $50,000 annually. And what we see for our graduates is that what we do is we survey our graduates right after graduation in an exit survey, and then a year post-graduation and 3 years post-graduation. So those students that we're surveying, 2 months after they graduate, about 56% are making $40,000 to $50,000 a year. 26% are making 50 to 60, and 4% are making above 60,000 a year. But by the time we get to 1 to 3 years post-graduation, 30% are still in that $40,000 to $50,000 a year range, but 32% are 50 to 60,000, and 16% are 60 to 70,000, and 6% are making over 70,000 a year. So by 1 to 3 years post-graduation, a majority of our students are making more than the average income for social workers in the state of Colorado. So I know that social work is not going to be as high paying as some jobs in the tech field, but we do feel confident that we're preparing students to be employable and to be well employed in the field post-graduation.
That's really helpful, and I appreciate all of the detail that you went into.
Yeah.
I appreciate the candor. Can you add a little bit if you're seeing any difference between the grads from the online program versus the mixed traditional program?
As far as I'm aware, in the data that I received from our chair, I don't see a difference. I don't even know if we survey for that. Kristen, I don't know if you have any awareness of any, I mean, it's not on your diploma. It doesn't, like your delivery method isn't anywhere on your transcript or diploma.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a course delivery option as opposed to a completely separate program. But yeah, Kristen, I don't know if you in your time in the field, if you saw any differences in folks' willingness to hire folks.
Well, I'm going to age myself, but I have been in academia for a long time now.
Yeah.
So I would say like when I was hiring, like online MSW programs weren't really a thing. So I can't speak to that. But anecdotally, I don't, like as a faculty person, I don't see a difference in the quality of the student who's graduating online versus graduating from a traditional program. I think that it's really about your preference for learning and what works for your life, and like whether you're in the Denver area or not. So if you're a person who doesn't think that you'll be successful in an online program, then you might not do as well, right? You might struggle a little bit more, and that might make it like a less rewarding experience for you. But I also think online teaching and learning has come a long way in the past few years, and you know, even I would say in the past few months, like we're getting this down. And so I think it's worth a shot to even take some online courses and to see how you feel about it, if it's something that you're not familiar with, because a lot of us are used to in person. And so we think that we're not going to like online, but it does have some redeeming qualities in terms of the flexibility and the ways in which you can engage. And so, yeah, but I don't think it necessarily is going to make you like one route makes for a better graduate. I did want to mention one thing that came up earlier, and I don't have statistics on this, Caitlin, maybe you do. Our graduates also have a really high rate of passing the licensing exams, and which is, so if you're interested in clinical practice and you want to become licensed, you have to take a couple of exams. You can even begin that process while you're a student still. And so our graduates do really, really well on these exams and a high rate of passing them, which I think speaks to the quality of the preparation.
Yeah, I just pulled that number. The national average pass rate on the ASWV clinical exam is 66%, and our MSW program graduates have an 81% pass rate. So quite a ways above the national average. And with what Kristen was just saying about the online learning, especially improving even just in the past few months, I feel like I've also heard conversations about the skills that having to take classes online are giving you as a future practitioner, because we are seeing more telehealth services, especially to serve rural areas where you might not be able to have a social worker in town. So there is definitely some skills that you can also take from your online classes to then, as a practitioner, apply, and in a job interview be like, well, you know, I took these classes online, so I have some skills that can be applied to telehealth and things like that.
Yeah, we do have, I would mention too, our program has some opportunities that are targeted for Colorado workforce development. And so these are like additional programs that you have to, that they're competitive. You have to apply to them once you're accepted into the program. And they usually come with a field placement that is very specific to the type of workforce development grant that the college receives, and they come with a stipend. So for example, we have workforce development grants for behavioral health. So people who are interested in a more clinical role and are interested in behavioral health. And also we have one, I don't know if this one is still active, Caitlin, correct me. We had one that was behavioral health and substance abuse.
Yeah, that was a 1-year supplemental to the major HRSA, but I know a lot of folks in the behavioral health, the HRSA grant, do have that substance abuse focus as well. Child welfare is our longest running one through the Title IV-E program. And then in the past, we've also had one that was more focused on healthcare. These are grant funded programs. So other than the Title IV-E child welfare one, it kind of depends on what grants our faculty are awarded, what we're able to offer, but that is a huge commitment of ours.
Yeah, so I think it's really beneficial because when if you decide to go that route and you get accepted into one of those targeted workforce programs, you get a field placement that's in that area. So if it was, an integrated care workforce development grant, you would be placed in an integrated care facility for your internship, and then you would have targeted additional training, like additional seminars that you get with the cohort of students who are in that program, and it comes with a stipend, and you're making a commitment to then work in that area for like a year or two.
Yeah,
I don't know exactly.
Every year you receive the stipend, you agree to a year in that area. So for child welfare, it's in the Department of Human Services. For the HRSA grants, it's at a HRSA approved agency. For HEALS, I think it was in a healthcare agency. That was our healthcare related one. But I always say that that's kind of a bonus because it's a guaranteed job after graduation to do your workforce payback.
Right.
Thank you guys both thank you both so much for adding so much detail. I really appreciate it. And I just have, I have a million questions actually, but I try to be brief. Have you seen students transferring from the full-time to the part-time or vice versa? And how do you manage that process?
It's a really great question. I'm glad you asked it because usually Claire chimes in on that and I forgot to during the overview. So we do have folks that transition from full-time to part-time and vice versa. The most common that we see is in our regular program students. They start the program part-time, do their foundation coursework over 2 years, and then ramp up to full-time for their concentration year. And that's a really easy plan because you're switching between foundation and concentration. We also sometimes see the reverse where a student starts full-time and powers through their foundation year and is like, that was a lot, I would like to slow down, please, which is also totally fine. We also sometimes have students that, due to life circumstances, need to make that switch mid-year. So a student starts their fall semester full-time but needs to scale back to part-time in the spring. If they successfully complete all 5 foundation fall courses, that just means the next fall they have to take a term off because they don't have any other courses in the foundation year that are offered in fall left to take. So it just can sometimes leave you with a semester off. We also have students that sometimes get on these revised plans because life happens and forces them to take a semester off. We had students in spring that when everything happened in March said, I need to take a step back, or students who said, I managed to power through spring, but I have kids that I'm homeschooling this fall, or elderly parents that I'm caring for, or relatives that I'm caring for, or a partner in an essential job. I need to take a fall semester off. And so Claire works really closely with all of our students to monitor their academic progress and help them come up with those revised plans as needed. So there are definitely times that it's easy to make that switch from full-time to part-time and vice versa between foundation and concentration years for our regular program students. We can also make it work and work with you if the needs outside the program make that a necessity. One thing my supervisor, Bailey, we've been interviewing for a position on our team and get a lot of folks asking us, you know, what do you love about your job or about the students? And one thing that she said that I think really rings true is that for a lot of our students at MSU Denver, in the MSW program, in the undergraduate program, school is a priority, but it's not always the top priority because our students have a lot going on in their lives, and that is fine. And we are happy that they are able to make those prioritizations. So when one of those other priorities becomes a bigger deal and you need to adjust your schedule and maybe take another year to reach graduation, we want to work with you to make that plan and figure out what is going to work best so that you come out the other side with your degree and, you know, with your mental health in a good place and your life outside of school in a good place.
That's so great to hear. That completes my portion of questions that apply to everyone. And if I could, I can wait, or I can also email you, but I have a question that most of this applies to me.
Okay, yeah. Hang out at the end and I can stay on and answer it. Or if we run out of time and you have to hop away, feel free to email.
Okay.
And yeah, in general, I dropped that email in the chat as well as those links to our websites and the phone number to call if you want to schedule an advising appointment. So if there's anything that you don't get answered today or that you think of, you know, at 2 a.m., feel free to email me.
One more thing that applies to everybody is when the field placements are happening, do folks get interviewed by their placement? And what does that look like?
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with the placement process, but I do know that there is an interview portion. And I believe that the field team says that, you know, it's the agency interviewing you and you interviewing the agency. It's a two-way street because you spend so much time there, you know, 16 hours a week in foundation year, 20 hours a week in concentration year. You want to make sure it's a good fit and a good learning environment. So I believe the way it works is that your navigator helps you identify placements that you're interested in our SONIA database. And then you send applications in, whether that's resumes, cover letters, whatever the agency requires. And then they contact folks for interviews. And I mean, I think that this is a fear that students sometimes have of not getting a placement because there is an interview component to it. And I can say that our field team works their butts off to make sure that every single student that puts in the work gets a placement. We have a handful of students every year that don't end up with a placement and have to go on a revised plan, but that's usually a result of them not working with their navigator for whatever reason. Sometimes it's life stuff has come up, sometimes it's just too much, but they will work with you to identify multiple agencies that fit your areas of interest so that you can have multiple interviews and make sure to find that placement that's the right fit for you.
Thank you.
Kristen, I don't know if you have anything else, any higher familiarity, because neither of us are on the field team, so.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other? Jess says, thank you for asking all those questions. Anyone else have questions? Feel free to either physically raise your hand, drop them in the chat. Yeah, Emily, let me unmute you. There we go. What questions do you have, Emily?
Yeah, I was just curious. There was brief mention about the certificate and licensure process. If someone was interested in starting that process while they were in the program, what does that look like? Yeah, if you could just speak to that a little bit, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and I know that a sunset bill was just passed at the end of this past legislative session that changed some things. So it used to be that you could start on the process, as Kristen mentioned, in terms of submitting your paperwork, taking the jurisprudence exam, which is like I'm not exactly familiar with the difference between the jurisprudence and the ASWB clinical, but I know that that could be done while you were in school, but you had to wait until you graduated to actually like hit the button on getting your LSW, licensed social worker status, and taking the ASWB clinical exam. And then in the old model, you had to have that LSW to start obtaining supervised clinical hours. And then after you got all your clinical hours, you just submitted updated paperwork and got your LCSW if you had already taken the clinical exam. What was just passed in the Sunset Bill is a candidate for LCSW status. So instead of having to obtain the LSW to start collecting your hours, you can submit the paperwork to be a candidate for LCSW status. So as soon as you graduate, you can start obtaining your supervised clinical hours, which is really great because what we were seeing this past spring with the pandemic is a lot of testing centers closing down, and you couldn't start accruing clinical hours until you had your LSW, and you couldn't do your LSW until you took the clinical exam, and you couldn't take the clinical exam. So it was really putting a huge burden on our spring graduates because they couldn't start progressing towards licensure. They had done everything they could while they were in school in terms of prepping, and then they hit this roadblock. So it's a really great thing that was passed by the legislature to really help smooth that path. But yeah, you can start doing the paperwork, start doing the jurisprudence exam, studying for the ASWB exam. And then what Claire does, our graduate advisor, every spring is she sends a list to ASWB of all of our spring graduates because it takes a while for your degree to show up on your transcript. So she sends them a list and says, these folks graduated, they're good to take the exam so that you're in their record and in their system. We also typically try to bring someone in from NASW Colorado every spring to talk about the licensure process for the folks that are about to graduate, although anyone is invited to attend. I know that sometimes when we're on campus, like the concentration year courses, if they meet during that time, we'll specifically be like, hey, you can go to this instead. That's my understanding of the process as a non-social worker. Kristen, I don't know if you have anything you want to add about licensure and what that looks like.
No, I think you covered it. I mean, I'm still learning and figuring out what the newest development is about the candidacy. But yeah, you do take that jurisprudence test first, and you can do that before you even graduate. So some students do like to, in their last year, start that process and start studying to prepare for the next pieces. And then once you have the credential or the candidacy, or you have your license number, then your hours can begin accruing towards the licensed clinical social worker. Mm-hmm.
I think it typically takes about 2 years to get all the hours that you need as a clinical. So all the clinical supervised hours, I think, because I was just looking it up on Dora for someone the other week, I think they say about 2 years is the average.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let me unmute Jess real quick. Oh, I unmuted and immediately muted. There we go.
Is that licensure something that goes with you from state to state, or is that a different requirement in other states?
Yeah, that it does not carry from state to state. So each state has their own licensing board. I know that you can hold licensure in multiple states at the same time. I was just reading Dr. Eileen Starr's bio recently. I think she's currently licensed in like 3 different states, Colorado and 2 on the East Coast. I think sometimes they have processes where you don't have to do as much work if you already held a licensure in another state. Like these hours might transfer and stuff, but you do have to go through the licensure process because licensure is done on a state-by-state level. There is no national social work licensure. But having a CSWE accredited degree does carry across all the states since that is a national body. So most states say you have to have an accredited MSW for licensure, and that is what will carry across the country.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anything else, Emily?
No, I think others have kind of touched on some of my questions as well. Appreciate you expanding on those.
Yeah. And Valley just asked in the chat, this is a really good question about licensure for school-based social work. And if you can do both LCSW and school-based social work. So they are 2 separate licenses. LSW and LCSW are done through DORA, the Department of Regulatory Agencies, I think, here in Colorado is what that stands for. I know it's DORA. I'm not 100% sure on what it stands for. Versus school-based social work is done through the Colorado Department of Education. You can be both an LCSW and hold the school-based social work licensure. I believe that the requirements for the school-based social work licensure are an MSW degree from an accredited program and coursework in specific areas that are covered in our program in our school-based social work elective. That's as much as I know on it. I don't know, Kristen, if you have any other insight. I know that that's not your top area of expertise.
It's not, but we do have some faculty who are well versed in school social work, like Dr. Eileen Starr. She's coming up a lot tonight.
Yeah.
And I also think Susie Ryder.
Yeah, I think that who's our director of field education. I think she might have some experience in that field as well.
No.
I think students that are interested in that typically try to get at least one of their placements, field placements at a school. We do have placements at schools. And then, yeah, it's just yet another licensure process, but it is paperwork that Claire helps you fill out. And then making sure that you took that school-based social work class in your undergrad. We also offer that class as a non-degree seeking class for students that have an MSW already and want to get into school-based social work but never took that content in their degree. So I know we had a student enroll this year who was a grad from our MSW program a few years back. And when she originally enrolled, she wasn't planning on doing school-based social work. And social work is such a flexible field. Your areas of interest may change over time. And so she came back to do that. I know that we're running up against our time. It is about 6:30. So like I said, this chat is going to be posted to our website so that you can refer back to it later. If folks have any other questions, I can hang out for about another 5 minutes. And yeah, I'm happy to also answer questions that you send via email. You can set up a one-on-one with Claire or with Rachel to learn more. And like I mentioned with the field team, I'm happy to be a bridge to other members of our department. If you have a general question and you aren't sure to ask, like if you want more detailed information about school-based social work, feel free to reach out and I can connect you with a faculty member that's an expert in that area. But thank you all so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you both, and thank you everyone for your questions. This was very informative. So
you were a great group with great questions. So thank you all so much.